Like Ozzy said, in a perfect world, our society would be balanced and all humans respected and equal. And if we look at ourselves, that will never happen. We've come close, but we're not there. It's usually about doing the right thing. Do we always do the right thing? Do we care for other people? Do we care for animals, people, whatever? No, we don't. What causes this? Probably most often from a business perspective, it's profits and powers. And profits and power, they usually get in the way. From a business perspective, in a capitalistic society like ours, it's a catch-22. Businesses are driven by profits. The business wants consumers to have enough disposable income to buy their goods. The business owner usually pays workers as small a salary as they can get by with in order for the business owner to maximize profit in the short term. In the long term, workers' salaries decline to a point where they are not able to purchase goods. There's high unemployment. There are 50 million people without health care. What does that do? The business owner lays off workers. There's high unemployment. Because our economy is dependent on consumer spending, it starts a downward spiral. We've been there before. The last time what brought us out of this funk that we're in was the internet. What's going to bring us out of the funk we're in now, I have no idea. I hope you're all out there inventing something like the internet, but that could be a ways off. Real wealth is usually created through labor. You can manipulate numbers, and now the government is going to go through this thing, I think it's called twist. And that's not real wealth. It's manipulating numbers. It's buying short-term bonds, or selling short-term bonds, buying long-term bonds. Is that real wealth? No, it's playing games. If labor costs can be kept low, profits will increase, creating wealth for the business owner. Government and business should be partners with the goal of the greater good for all, or you might say profit over people, or people over profit. But if you look at that, it does create inefficiencies. Our gross domestic product probably declines some, but are we better off or worse off than we are right now? Ideally, social justice should be the goal. And through that, it would probably reduce corporate profits. This is a long-term scenario, but in the U.S., we get caught up in the short-term profit. The long-term sacrifice, as long as it's somebody else's sacrifice and not our own. A former employer that I had, their motto was, there's $1 on the table, grab it and don't worry about tomorrow. I have a feeling that motto is probably still out there and very relevant. And that's not doing the right thing. I would argue with anybody when they talk about free markets. You can succeed if you want to. In the very complicated society we have now, I don't believe that for a minute. Free markets do not exist. If you are a huge corporation with a lot of money and you're going to compete with a business on Main Street, is that a free market? No, it's not. The corporation can get by on 2% margin of profit. The small business on Main Street can barely survive at a 30% profit margin. What does that do? You're going to buy from the large corporation or the small one on Main Street when it costs you more money. There's really inequality everywhere. We talked about health care. There's even inequality there. We've talked to Gritman a number of times about a family practice physician. A family practice physician will see 80% of the people in the community. If something's really wrong with you, they'll refer you to a specialist. Quite often in law school alone, those specialists make 25 times more than the family practice physician. Is that fair? When they talk about reducing the cost, the reimbursement for Medicare to the physicians, guess who gets hurt the most? It's not the specialty surgeons. I would challenge you to look at the political campaign contributions that specialty surgeons contribute to our politicians. And then you look at the family practice physicians that contribute, it's it's not even in the cards. Wealth, again, has created an inequity, and a wealth that may not be fair, but there's power there that they have used. Another example are illegal farm workers. A farmer knows it's probably illegal to hire people that don't have green cards or the right papers, but think of the profits by paying an illegal farm worker $2 to $3 an hour, working 12 days or 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. They know it's illegal, but there's higher short-term profits in doing this. They're not working toward the greater good, but it's profits. From a consumer perspective, there is lower cost fruit because of this. Would you pay $2 for an apple from a socially conscious farmer, or $1 for an apple from one that exploits illegal workers? So we really have to look at ourselves when we talk about inequality and human rights too. Who perpetuated this? Actually, we did. Since 1979, real wages adjusted for inflation have not grown at all for most American workers, but the cost of living has increased, meaning that the middle class is slipping into poverty. Meanwhile, the richest have become spectacularly richer. Today, the average CEO makes 242 times the average wage of their worker. And a third of the national gross domestic product goes into the pockets of 1% of the population. Incredibly, many corporation-controlled media mouth the words redistribution of wealth. I'm sure you've heard that before. And then you'll hear the scorn that comes from them, how unfair that is because they earned this. Not mentioning that they had the power and the profits and the money to do that. As far as trickle-down economics, that does not work. If you look at the bailouts that came from the government, the trillions of dollars that went, and I can give you a prime example of banks. Banks took a lot of money. It was funded mostly to the larger banks, not any of the smaller banks, because they were kind of non-existent. And if a small bank failed in a small community, it was kind of a non-issue, so let them fail. But we need to pump a lot of money into Chase and Bank of America and all those banks. Right now they're sitting on $2 trillion in cash reserves. We are awash in cash. You probably have a savings account at a bank that you're paid 0.05% interest. You're paid nothing. That's because there is so much cash. This country is drowning in their own cash. Are these corporations using that cash to create jobs? No. That cash gives them a great deal of power, however, and it continues on with the inequity. If you look at this, the great equalizer, we can look at ourselves, we can try to do the right thing, but we go by the $1 apple instead of the $2 apple. Government is probably the great equalizer. Government and business should be working together. Are they? Yeah, they probably are, but it's to squeeze down the middle class for greater profits that float to the top. And education. Education is an equalizer too, but it's funded by government. Government has chosen not to fund education adequately. Healthcare is the same thing. In 1990, the health of our nation was the 4th best in the world. In 2010, it's 37th best, but it's also the most expensive healthcare in the world. It's twice as expensive as the #1 healthcare country in the world. What have we done? Who's holding up that profit? Why are we all paying all this money for 37th best? We can do something about that. Government can do something about that, but it's not happening. But we can force that to happen. The people of this country can speak if they want to and have a greater equality than we have now. It's pretty far You know, it seems like in this country, we swing from one end to the other. We're never very stable. It's either a great advantage over here and a disadvantage for someone else. But we have the power to do that if we choose to. But that's really up to us, and we have to look in the mirror